Walls, 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 and walls. I want everybody to understand as clearly as you can that Paul's gospel, even though it's a gospel of grace, is a gospel of walls. It is not carte blanche. It is not an invitation to add whatever you want into it. It's strict in that it is what it is. And what it is complete, unadulterated grace. You cannot add anything else to it without making it a non-gospel, without nullifying it, without destroying its essence. And the one thing you cannot add to this evangel is behavior. You cannot add behavior. Behavior has nothing to do with it. 2 Timothy 1:9, this salvation is not in accord with our acts. It's in accord with the grace of God. And that is a snare. That creates a scandal. I am today, at the end of the week, going to talk to you about the scandal of the Evangel. Because the word snare that occurs in Galatians 5:11, and I'm going to read that passage now. It comes from the Greek word scandalon, which is where we get our English word scandal. This is literally the scandal of the cross. I call it the scandal of the Evangel. The message is scandalous because it has walls and because it eliminates the one thing that people keep wanting to add to it, which is personal belief, personal faith, and behavior. And again, just because it's an evangel of grace doesn't make it a giant pot that you can throw whatever little addition, recipe, vegetable in it that you think ought to be there. It's scandalous because of how tough it is against that. Read this to you before, Galatians 5:11. Now I, brethren, this is Paul speaking, I, brethren, if I am heralding circumcision, why am I still being persecuted? I explained this to you before. Paul would not have been persecuted if he was heralding a cooperative evangel. But he was being persecuted, meaning he was not heralding the circumcision evangel. Do you hear the word in circumcision? It's circumcision. It's an act. It's an act that you do. Paul says this is the gospel of the uncircumcision. Consequently, he says the snare of the cross has been nullified. It's almost as though Paul is saying, God forbid that the snare of the cross should be nullified, because the snare is essential. Because if I'm teaching the evangel and that snare is not there, then I'm teaching the wrong evangel. If I'm teaching this gospel and I'm widely accepted and I don't cause anybody any trouble, I could go into the mainstream Christian churches. I could go into the Catholic Church, the Baptist Church, the Pentecostal Church, and I teach the gospel, and I'm well received. Then somehow the snare of the cross of Christ has been nullified. But we don't want to nullify it, because as soon as it's nullified, it loses its essence. It repels people. It's scandalous. What repels people? The gospel of Christ, of the cross of Christ. People hate it because it's non-cooperative, because it stands alone. What is a snare or a scandal? A snare, Greek word scandalon, speaks of anything that hinders the reception of faith or serves as an occasion of unbelief. It pushes people away. And I'm telling you, the cross, the message of the cross, pushes most people away. To be snared is to be shocked by some supposed violation of morality, what you think is moral or what you think is a propriety. It's just not right that it should be this way. How can you declare this to be true? I hear that all the time, and I'm sure Paul heard it too. People are offended at the gracious nature of the evangel, because that means that there's no difference between me and another person who doesn't get the evangel. It means that the choice is up to God. Who gets it when they get it? Because, as I told you, it's independent of behavior, independent of any human activity. Romans 9:23. They stumble on the stumbling stone, according as it is written, Lo, I am laying in Zion a stumbling stone and a snare rock. This is Paul, Romans 9:32. He is citing Isaiah 8:14. Lo, I am laying in Zion a stumbling stone. Why would he do that? Human nature is such, and yes, God is the author of human nature, that it can't handle. It thinks it's scandalous to save anyone without their cooperation. And as I told you, the cross is stupidity to the Greek, and it's a snare to the Jew. So the snare of the cross is the scandalous nature of certain vital aspects of the word of the cross. I remind you of the word of the cross, 1 Corinthians 1:18, for the word of the cross. The word of the cross is stupidity indeed to those who are perishing. This is another example of it. The word of the cross is stupidity. The word of the cross is the completeness of it, and that is stupidity even to the religious person. Even to the religious person, it's stupidity. They don't see how it makes any sense that it wouldn't be up to an individual whether that individual wants to be saved or not. People are offended by that. That's where the scandal comes in. The word of the cross, not the word of free will, not the word of come to the altar, not the word of do something righteous and worthy for Jesus Christ. That's not what it says here in 1 Corinthians 1:18, is it? No, it's the word of the cross. And that alone, see, that's the gospel, the word of the cross, the beginning and the end. That's it. It's done. That's the whole thing. That is the word of the cross. That is stupidity, even to the Jews and the Greeks. They cannot handle it. It's stupid. It doesn't make sense because the religious people, they see it as an offer. And to them, it must be an offer or it makes no sense. I've had people tell me that. Martin, if this isn't an offer that I can accept or reject, then it makes no sense. What purpose is it to herald it if I don't have the freedom to either choose it or reject it? It doesn't make sense to them. They don't see that the ultimate arbiter, the ultimate deciding factor in salvation is Christ, is the cross. See, they say that, but they absolutely don't mean it. To them, again, it's stupidity. The word of the cross, the word of the cross. No free will, no behavior. The word of the cross, that's stupidity. You go into any church and say, word of the cross, and they want to add to it. Nope, you got walls here. What do you mean the word of the cross? I mean the word of the cross. They think they know what you're talking about, but they have no idea what you're talking about. You have to get specific. The word of the cross does not accept behavior. That means it doesn't accept free will. It doesn't accept it. It alone saves. Believe me. They go crazy over that because they can't wrap their heads around why would it even be offered? That's what they think. They think it's offered. That's the whole problem. They think this is an offer. They have reduced the sacrifice of Christ. They have reduced the word of the cross to an offer. They are scandalized by the cross. They are scandalized by the Evangel. Scandalized. That's why it's a stumbling stone. And they totally trip over it. And I think that's one of the root causes is they think it's an offer. That's the only way they can see it. It's the only way it makes sense to them because now it's up to them. And this is the ultimate self-satisfaction. This is the ultimate raising of selfish. Now I have been put in the position, this is what they think, I've been put in the position by God where I make the decision. And they're standing at this crossroads. And they have a road to the left and a road to the right. They stop and they like the fact. This is the hour of decision. Isn't that what Billy Graham said? The hour of decision. This is your time. Your salvation depends on what you do today. They just tripped. They just were scandalized by the cross. They just thought the word of the cross was stupidity. The snare of the cross is that justification Being declared righteous is a gratuitous, gracious, saving work on behalf of helpless, I'll say it again, helpless sinners through a deliverance which is in Christ Jesus. So this is mind-boggling. The Evangel itself, the very proclamation of the Evangel itself, is scandalous. This is because, according to human beings, it's not right that God should choose whom he's going to save and when he's going to save them. He decides who and when. God does. God does. God does. God does. God does. God decides. People don't think that's right. Remember what I said earlier? It offends their moral sensibilities. They feel like God's being a bully. God's bullying them. Leave us alone. Leave us alone, yeah. Leave us alone, they say. Leave us alone to choose. The Evangel is also deemed to be scandalous when it is claimed by the religious that it's not right for God to finally save everyone, even those who refuse to accept Jesus Christ in this life. That's scandalous. It's a scandal when you come teaching that. Paul says, for this we are toiling and being reproached, 1 Timothy 4, 9, and 10, that we rely on the living God who is the Savior of all humanity, especially of believers, especially, not exclusively, of believers. Yet this is scandalous. It's just not right for God to save everyone, including those who don't believe in this life. And yet how come there are some who don't believe in this life? Because God hasn't given them belief, otherwise known as faith. That's why. Those who consider the Evangel a scandal also say that it is not right, even after judgment, even after severe judgment, it's not right to grant endless life and glory to everyone. Especially not right to those who failed in this life to do what these other people, these religious people, said they should do or thought they should do. Well, they should have done this. They should have done that like I did. So it's scandalous that you're letting them in even though they didn't do what I did. You see how people run this whole Evangel through the sieve of their own moral sensibilities, their own ideas of the cross? And to them, practically speaking, the cross is stupidity, no matter what they insist. Because by their arguments, by their hatred of your message, that's your proof. I mean, it goes back right here again, doesn't it? 1 Corinthians 1:18. The word of the cross is stupidity to those who are perishing. Fits in perfectly with what I told you. That those are perishing. They're perishing who think this. Remember, I told you those who are opposing is proof of their destruction. That was Philippians 1:29. Those who are opposing you, it's proof of their destruction. Now we find out that the cross is stupidity to those who are perishing. Same truth. Those who can't handle the word of the cross with nothing else. That's the Evangel, folks. Nothing else added. Nothing else added. Those who can't handle that are perishing. They're not believers in the cross. They're not believers in Paul's Evangel. They're scandalized by the Evangel. God has simply not given them faith. Yes, he will give them faith someday. And I announce to you today, this is startling, but it's part of the message of salvation. The eventual salvation of all is that God is even, get this, even one day, he's gonna save Christians.